Yeah, that's okay. Right. Okay. So good morning, everybody. It's 9:30, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Ian Moncur, Chairman of the committee. The introduction of the top table to my left is Vice Chair Councillor Karen Vincent. Dawn Matthews, Committee Officer, will be aiding me in my committee role and taking notes. To my right is Helen Mellors, the Assistant Director of Planning. Nigel Harris, the Area Team Manager, presenting the cases. And we also have Leah Arthurton and Jess Hammond from Democratic Services taking care of the live streaming. We also have here for item number 1, Helen Bowman in the right-hand corner there. She's a Senior Planning Officer and is here to help on application 1 and has worked extensively on the water drainage system. So any questions in regard to that, Helen is here to help us. Before we go any further, Councillor Vincent will read out the fire safety notice.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are not expecting a fire drill today, so if the fire alarm sounds, we will need to evacuate the building. There are 2 fire exits from this room. One is through the double doors, which you came in through, and the other is to the right of the stage, my left, which leads to an external fire escape. Please note that you should not use the lift in the event of a fire, and in the event of evacuation, we need to meet to the left of the driveway at the main entrance to Thorpe Lodge. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, this meeting is being live streamed, and members of the public are also welcome to film proceedings as long as they're not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film or record the meeting, could they please identify themselves now? Okay, thank you. To ensure the meeting is conducted in accordance with COVID restrictions, please could you remain in your seats and only leave your seats if necessary. We will have a 5-minute comfort break in between each application, and only leave your seat again if necessary, and be mindful of social distancing while moving around. And while moving around outside of your seats, please wear your masks. Can we all ensure that our mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent? And councillors, may I remind you not to use your mobile phone whilst the committee is in session. If an occasion arises when you must use your mobile, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate that this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The items will be considered in the order printed on the agenda. Members of the public can only speak if prior arrangements have been made in accordance with the council's scheme of public speaking. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. Parish Council with a maximum of 15 minutes per category. And I must stress that only people who have registered to speak may be able to address the committee. The order will be as follows. The planning officer will present the application. Public speakers will then be asked to present their case, which will be followed by questions by members of the public, members of the committee. And these questions are only to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is parish, town council first, followed by objectors, and finally supporters. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for an allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes for each speaker. This will be followed by questions from members of the committee. Again, these questions will be only to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The committee will then discuss and determine the application. Finally, there is no provision for members of the public to circulate documents or photographs at this meeting. Are there any questions before I open the meeting? Okay, excellent. Let's move on to item agenda 1, and that is to receive declarations of interest from members. Before I go a little further, I've just got one on item 2. At the AGM, we voted on the compulsory purchase order of some land for the roundabout. Now, that is the same roundabout, but it's not the same issue that we're voting on today. So members of who are at the AGM need to declare a non-pecuniary interest. And can I have a show of hands who was present at the AGM? Okay.
Everyone present.
Lovely.
All members.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And is there any other members have any other declarations of interest? Councillor Brennan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, with regard to item 1, This is in my ward as well, but I have had no contact with the applicant or any other party.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to declare a personal and non-pecuniary interest in item number 3 as I'm acquainted to the applicants, but they haven't bothered me in any way.
All right, thank you. Okay. Anybody else? No? Lovely. That moves us on to item 2, apologies of absence.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from councillors Adams, Folger and Karimi Guven-Liu, and their substitutes are councillors Leggett, Copplestone and Holland.
Thank you, substitutes. Appreciate you stepping in. Thank you. Item 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of April. Can I take them as a true reflection of the day's events? Yep. Thank you very much. And any matters arising? No, no, no. Okay. Item 5, applications for planning permissions to be considered by the committee. Item 1 is application 2020-2164, land at Dawson's Lane, Blowfield. Over to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. So item 1, Blowfield, or land at Dawson's Lane, Blowfield. The application seeks to vary an existing 2019 planning permission for 12 dwellings by changing the dwelling types on plots 2 and 3 from 2-storey to single-storey. In terms of layout, scale and appearance, this change is entirely acceptable. The principal issue is that this change increases the roof area by 78 square metres, and this additional roof water has to be drained into the existing approved sustainable drainage system serving this development. Some of the planning committee here today will have been present and determined the planning application for the approved surface water drainage scheme, which came to planning committee in September 2020. So for some, this case will be familiar. Just to indicate that the application is before members today for consideration at the request of one of the local members for the reasons set out in paragraph 4.2 on page 18 of your agenda. So as usual, we'll go to the visual presentation. That's just to put in context, this is the application site in here. In fact, construction is now well advanced on site in terms of the construction of the residential dwellings. It's a site that is accessed off Blowfield Corner Road that runs east-west, as you're seeing on that bottom of your slide. Dawson's Lane is a private track which has now been made up to adoptable standard for a length that services the development. That development is then served by a surface water drainage scheme that takes water through an adopted Anglian water sewer into then a privately maintained ditch system where water is taken on the east side of Dawson's Lane, heading down in this direction, where it's then culverted under Dawson's Lane into another ditch before going into an infiltration basin that fits into a sand seam that allows surface water to infiltrate. Aerial view, obviously this is an undeveloped state, but that's the application site. It's just to put it in context in terms of the built-up area and where the drainage ditches are on the east side in this agricultural land, and then coming underneath, and then the basin in this area here. Illustration of the development itself. These are the 2 plots where there's a mix of dwelling types, including affordable housing. And these 2 plots are proposed to change from houses to 2 bungalows, which in visual terms is entirely acceptable and actually gives rise to a mix and range of house types. This is the drainage system. We start with the development here where you've got surface water from the made-up road and from the impermeable areas of the development going into an Anglian water sewer that then sends that water at a controlled flow rate into a new ditch system, which, as I say, already talked about, then takes that water down into a sand seam where it then infiltrates outside of an area that is at risk of surface water flooding. Just take you through slides now of that drainage system. This hopefully illustrates elements within the committee report and within the representations that you've had from the applicant's drainage consultant. This is the attenuation basin. There's a head wall here that allows flows if we have significant rainfall events and the pressure through the Anglian water system is so great, then it will allow a discharge of water in this attenuation basin. And then when the pressure lowers within the system, that water then comes out of the attenuation and back into the sustainable drainage system. That attenuation basin is here. That drainage comes through and picks up the impermeable roof and waters from the road, comes under through that Anglian water sewer to a discharge point here. There's a flow control device that then either sends water into the attenuation basin, but predominantly into the ditch system, which then flows to the south. That new ditch has been dug. Some of you saw slides back in 2020 in September. That ditch, say, runs down to a new head wall 3, just to put it in context. You've got head wall 2 that allows that flow out into that ditch system, down into head wall 3, which is at the head of the culvert. This is head wall 2 that then discharges into the top of that ditch at the northern end. You can see the vegetation that's now started to occur. Again, looking north from that top end of that drainage system. You are starting now to get vegetation within the bottom of that ditch and to stabilize the sides of that ditch and on the top as well. Further down the ditch, this is towards the northern end, getting close to head wall 3. Again, you can see vegetation, but there is some areas where there isn't vegetation yet established within the base of that ditch or on the side walls. Then coming down to head wall 3, this is the entrance to the culvert that then takes water through a piped system which goes under Dawson's Lane. And that then discharges out through another head wall 4, into this drainage system, into then the infiltration basin. While this slide is on, I will just illustrate, in the report, it does indicate that the developer has dug 2 additional trenches, and it needs to be pointed out that these don't form part of the approved drainage scheme. They're supplemental to that, but he has dug a trench running east-west here and north-south here to seek to engage and take any overland flows so that they're directed around the basin into the blind ditch to the south, so that that overland flow doesn't go into the infiltration basin. That's head wall 4. This is the exit of the culvert, then leading into the ditch to the infiltration basin. You can see quite well vegetated, the base of the ditch at this point and the sides as well. And that will become more established over time. Looking further along that ditch with the basin in the distance. And then we have included these slides because of the event that occurred in December, as referred to in the report. This is, you'll probably all be familiar, when the county and the country experienced significant rainfall events, and the basin was full on the 24th of December. And we will just run through slides at that point. Again, slides taken on the 24th of December. Left-hand side is the infiltration basin. Right-hand slide is the blind ditch. You can see quite full. This is again taken the day after, on Christmas Day, 24th of December. And on the 26th, on Boxing Day. And on the 27th, when there was experience of water overtopping and creeping out of the basin on its north side and then heading towards the blind ditch. Again, one on the 27th. And again, overflowing marginally on the 28th. Investigations after the basin dried out did provide evidence that silt had been washed into that infiltration basin, over a period of time, and that's best evidenced on the next slide. You can see here all this material which has cracked as it's dried out. That's a clay silt layer that has been washed into the infiltration basin. It has been, that thin layer has been scraped back and has revealed then the sand that's evident underneath, and that's that sand seam that then forms the infiltration, the ability for that drainage system to readily infiltrate. That material has now been removed. As the report indicates, the basin and the ditches have to be inspected on a monthly basis as part of the approved management and maintenance plan, and action has to be taken if there are elements found that compromise the ability of that drainage system to work effectively. That silt has all been removed by hand. It's a thin layer that was just skimmed off and then removed to reveal back to the sandy infiltration basin. This was a photograph taken on the 28th of May by the case officer. Again, this followed a period of rain, very little water in there, although some more deposits have gone into the basin. But again, that gets picked up by the management and maintenance plan, and we understand that that material is being removed possibly today by the developer, as it's his responsibility still whilst the development is under construction. That again just illustrates, I did refer earlier to where that ditch has been dug by the developer. There's an additional ditch, small drainage ditch, doesn't require planning permission because it's not deemed to be an engineering operation. It's of limited scale, but that's important to state that that does not form part of the approved drainage strategy. That's something in addition to, and that's to try and capture and prevent overland flows that can occur in excessive rainfall events from going into the basin. Although it does need to be made clear that that water in any event would end up at the blind ditch to the north, which is at a lower level. Just in terms of the house types, they are the two bungalows which are proposed, entirely in keeping with the area and deemed to be acceptable. And I'll leave members on that slide and just pick out some key points from the officer's report. In paragraphs 5.9 and 5.10 of the assessment, it is clarified that the approved surface water drainage system has the capacity to take the additional surface water from the proposed increased roof area, and Norfolk County Council, in their role as the lead local flood authority, have confirmed this. It is important to state that the LLFA are the statutory consultee in this respect and provide professional scrutiny and technical advice on surface water drainage to the local planning authorities. And that's what has occurred in this instance. In fact, they've been engaged and probably gone above and beyond in terms of looking at this particular application and have been heavily involved in assessing the proposal and concluding that it's acceptable in surface water drainage terms. What has occurred on the ground, and as you've seen evidenced in the photos of the recent significant rainfall event, is that the basin did become full on one occasion and was slow to drain, and this led to the representations that we've received that the approved surface water drainage scheme is considered to be not fit for purpose, particularly when the residential development remains to be completed, and that additional flows should not be discharged into this. The assessment before you on pages 26 to 28 goes into great detail describing the events that led to the basin filling and the resulting slow infiltration from this. Investigations established the clay silts, which you saw, they had been washed into the infiltration basin, thereby reducing its infiltration rate. Also, there was the likelihood of overland flows contributing to both water and silt levels in the basin. The developer has acted to remedy or to try and prevent overland flows from the high land to the south from entering the basin, and that water which would end up in the blind ditch eventually by digging those two trenches which you've seen in the slides. Material to the effectiveness of the surface water drainage system is its management and maintenance, a key part of any approved drainage strategy. The drainage system is relatively new and still bedding in terms of becoming vegetated and stabilizing the ditch sides and bottom to prevent scouring and washing of clay silts into the infiltration basin. As indicated in paragraph 5.21, the approved management and maintenance plan requires the infiltration basin and ditches to be checked at least once a month and for maintenance to be carried out if found necessary. A direct result of this has been that the developer has had to clear the clay silts from the infiltration basin on at least one occasion. He has also sought to accelerate the vegetation in the ditches by scattering seed, etc. The approved management and maintenance plan is working as evidenced. However, for additional certainty, and as reported in paragraph 5.22 of your report, it is recommended that an additional condition be included that a verification report be submitted after completion of the last property to verify whether the surface water drainage system is operating correctly in accordance with the approved strategy, and if not, that any required remediation works are carried out in accordance with a timetable to be agreed. Draw members' attention to the supplementary schedule, page 87, where we've reported additional representations that have been received. In summary, it is important to restate that the surface water drainage strategy as approved has the capacity to take the additional roof water now proposed, as confirmed by the technical consultee, the lead local flood authority, and this approved strategy is in accordance with the NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, guidance, the development plan policy, and it is not considered that this will lead to increased flood risk elsewhere, as concluded in paragraphs 5.25 and 5.26. The other consideration is that the changes in design of the two properties are considered entirely acceptable as summarised in 5.27. The proposal is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and that additional verification report condition as set out on pages 29 and 30 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nigel. Is any questions from the councillors for clarification? Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me, 5.22, Nigel, it relates to this point about the ditch and the issue around silting up, etc. And I think the slides adequately sort of show what the issue is with the silt going in, therefore the filtration can't work, etc. So what seems to be key here, and this is for clarity, what seems to be key here is that at the moment, the developer is responsible for the monthly inspection, and therefore if there's an issue, clearing it back out again. So in the future, once it's developed, one, who is going to be responsible and how will that be financed on an ongoing basis?
Through you, Chair, that will be managed, it will be put into the hands of a management company, and the occupiers of the dwellings or the landlord in terms of the affordable housing will contribute and pay for that maintenance through that management company.
So it'll be part funded by, not solely by the residents?
It will be entirely funded by the residents.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Steve?
Yep.
Just lovely. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point for clarification. On page 21, it refers to 8 letters of objection from the revised calculations. And listening to Nigel, am I right in saying that those objections have been covered, particularly the one that says that where is it? Houses have been occupied and the drainage condition has been breached and is not operating correctly? Just clarification on it. I tried to read it all through, but it's rather a lot of pages, Chairman.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've responded to those issues within the office's detailed appraisal and assessment.
And they're all covered.
They are covered, yes. I mean, what I would say is the system is still bedding in and the development remains to be completed.
Oh,
so in terms of the development itself, you've got areas of the construction site that haven't yet been set down to garden, which is going to create permeable surface and therefore capturing surface water. It's a moment in time, but what the system has demonstrated through the effective management is that it works.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Nothing else? Okay, we're moving on to the public speakers. Can I just confirm before we get the public speakers that the councillors, you've the written representations for this, we've all read the written representation? Yep, okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, Blowfield Parish Council, Stuart Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll get 5 minutes. Dawn will give you a 1 minute warning
Okay.
when
That's fine.
we're
I suspect I probably won't get there, but
okay. All right.
Um,
Over to you, sir.
I'm representing Bluefield Parish Council and here to attempt to protect the existing residents and parishioners close to this development. Whilst the original planning application was strongly opposed by the parish council, not least because the development was outside the settlement boundary for the parish, it was subsequently passed by the planning authority. This latest attempt to vary the conditions further exacerbates the situation. As Nigel has already stated, over the Christmas period 2020, the drainage system to support this development failed when the site is only 25% built out and the local road network is yet to be connected to the same drainage system. No comprehensive explanation of this failure has been forthcoming that would alleviate any of the parishioners' concerns. I'm going to repeat things that were originally said. To accept the condition change and further increase the volume of water flowing to this seemingly inadequate drainage system appears fundamentally flawed, and the ability for it to cope has yet to be proven. Acceptance of this change goes contrary to the NPPF. Development should be steered away from vulnerable areas, such as those subject to flood risk. And contrary to Blowfield Parish Neighbourhood Plan, ENV3, all development should take advantage of modern drainage methods to prevent future development should not contribute to the problem of flooding or drainage issues or pollution. Whilst this change may appear trivial and minor, the impact of the original development approved and this subsequent change have had and is continuing to have a major impact on people's lives, affecting both their physical and mental health. It would appear that little heed or consideration has been given to local knowledge that can demonstrate historical experience of persisting flooding in this area. Even before any development was commenced, and no consideration or planning has been put in place for the proven and predicted future global climate changes that have and will result in more extreme weather events, including frequent periods of increased rainfall over short periods of time, as witnessed over the winter this year. I would ask the committee to be minded to refuse this application with due regard and consideration to the impact on existing local residents, and wonder who, in the event that this is passed, will offer to underwrite the existing residents when it becomes clear that this development results in their inability to obtain flood insurance in the not too distant future. I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there any questions for the public speaker? No? Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sure you've read the representation as well, and also the officer's report on the flooding, and you're basically saying it's wrong, as I understand it anyway. On what basis are you actually putting forward the argument that it is actually wrong?
I'm saying there is concern, given that there are only 3 houses built on that development, the road isn't connected, and yet it overtopped in December this year, indicate that it doesn't seem to be fit for purpose. I'm not a drainage expert, but just from a layman's point of view, that's the way it seems to me.
So, Chair, if I ask again, the representation does actually indicate why it was overtopped, and are you saying that is not a reasonable answer?
I understand the explanation on why it overtopped in this event, but remember again, and I stress it again, this is only with 3 houses built and no roadwork connected. The volume of water through this system must only increase, and it appears to me that even with the explanation that there was a degree of silt in the bottom of the pond, it doesn't seem to be man enough for the job, if I can use a layman's expression.
Okay, thank you. Lovely, thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, Mary Moxon, your 5 minutes begins when you're ready.
Thank you. I am representing the residents who are impacted by the Dawson's Way off-site drainage strategy. We have a few points we'd like you to consider. Nigel explained that the applicant has put in an additional 2 areas of ditch to try and deflect the overland flows before they reach the blind ditch and before they infiltrate into his pond. The background for that is that the site was an agricultural field which drained naturally down towards the blind ditch system, but the intervening fields got waterlogged and saturated with that, so there was no overland flows. This additional ditch will do no good whatsoever because the land gets soggy between the site and the blind ditch. There is no actual water flowing. So that particular place is just pointless. More of the water in the blind ditch, or most of the water in the blind ditch, comes from fields to the north and a road culvert on Blowfield Corner Road to the east. The actual area between the site and the blind ditch is not actually impacting in terms of actually adding water to the blind ditch system, and therefore it will only saturate soil. It won't actually add volume into that ditch. The Dawson's Way strategy currently moves water through the system at a maximum rate of 18.8 litres a second. There's no loss of water en route, which there was with the natural system before development started. This is a massive increase of flow into an area adjacent to a high surface water flood risk zone. So it's moving it from, as it was at 0.5 litres a second, dissipating en route, to 18.8 litres coming straight down the system. The pond fails to infiltrate when there is water in the blind ditch system, and this is being totally ignored throughout. Photographic evidence has been provided for this. Residents notice that it's not just the silt, it's the fact that the area is saturated and the blind ditch is taking the first lot of water away before the pond gets started. This new application has increased the flow rate again to 21.6 litres a second, equating to an additional 10,000 litres of water per hour at maximum rate going through the system. In December, with only 3 of the 12 houses connected, most weren't built, the Dawson's Way pond system failed and water spilled over, joining the floodwater overflowing from the blind ditch system. It took nearly 3 months for that water in the pond to dissipate, although the blind ditch system cleared, refilled and cleared again a lot quicker. Once fully built, only then will the maximum water be in the Dawson's Way system, and both systems will fail at the same time. This last time in December, the blind ditch system overflowed about 3 days before the pond overflowed. When you've got more water in the system, the Dawson's Way system, they'll both overflow at the same time, increasing flood risk for everybody else around. The Assistant Director of Planning stated in committee last time the Dawson's Way system would work for the lifetime of the development without increasing flood risk to existing property, MPPF 155. 10 months from construction, on a part-built site, this system failed. Planning conditions in September included the detailed maintenance strategy and management company. Nigel said that this was happening on site. When we stand there, it doesn't happen unless we say something to planning and then somebody comes out. So this planning condition actually appears redundant for those who actually live by the system. The applicant response to the pond failure was to blame all third-party issues and comment that he wasn't obligated to do anything. There was a claim the Dawson's Way scheme provides mitigation for impermeable surfaces on site, but the MPPF says there should be no increased flood risk from new sites. The planning office response, it was silt in the pond base, and therefore they're trying to limit that. Silt was removed in late April from the pond base, and it's now 70% covered in 6 weeks, with 92 millimetres of rain in that period. To conclude, this variation only results in one small one-off sill payment, and yet you're not protecting existing property. The issue is the infiltration pond failure because it cannot infiltrate when neighbouring system is full and the surrounding land is saturated. The silt makes little difference. This is only a paper covering over the cracks in the system that does not work. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mrs. Moxton. Any questions for the public speaker? No? Okay, the supporters, obviously, we've had the written representation from them. Over to you, councillors. Oh, sorry, councillor. I do apologise. We've amended the piece of paper that I read from to put that in the right order. And so next time, sorry, councillor Thompson, your 5 minutes.
Morning, everyone.
Thank you.
I won't argue that the application doesn't appear to have ticked all the boxes in relation to the design and the technical side of the documentation. The sticking point here is that the already agreed drainage strategy has failed as the infiltration pond has overflowed when only 3 houses have been completed. It does say 5 in the report, but you might want to fact check that with Ms Bowman. The report is asking you to essentially disregard that incident, that it's all down to silting, which is explainable, and steps to be taken will prevent this happening again. I would urge you to satisfy yourself that it is indeed explainable and will not happen again. If you cannot do that, then you're required to deny the application as it will pose an increased risk of flooding elsewhere. The report suggests that the silting of the basin was due to a combination of excess silt from the construction site and a lack of vegetation. But the only evidence given for that is a general comment from the LLFA on all construction sites at paragraph 5.16 in the report, where it says, the LLFA have confirmed that construction sites often produce more runoff during construction than when the development is completed. They do not say that this is so in this particular case. The report also says at clause 5.15 that the establishment of vegetation will reduce the silt deposits in future, but it doesn't say how much vegetation is needed, how much the silt will be reduced by, and how far into the future. I'd say this is sufficiently vague enough to give rise to some doubt. If the committee feels that is enough evidence to conclude the silting will not occur again, then it will of course approve the application. If the committee has any doubt that this will occur, it may be minded to then consider the maintenance agreement in place will afford sufficient protection. But if the pond silts in future, then will the maintenance agreement really help? I ask you to consider this scene. You are running a bath with boiling hot water and go off to make a cup of tea. Upon your return, you realise the hot tap is stuck and you can't remove the plug with your hand as it's too hot. By the time you realise what's happening and get a cold hose to mitigate the hot water, the bath has overflowed and is now flooding your bathroom. You start feeding cold water into your bath, but by the time you've got enough in that you could get your hand in to pull the plug out, the kitchen below is now flooded too. By the time you realised what was happening and were able to take action, it was too late. If the pond silts again in a wet winter, then when will the maintenance company know? Will this be a week or 2 weeks after they've already been out to check it? How long will it take them to consider and implement a solution? How do you desilt a pond that's about 1.5 metres deep and 45 feet by 95 feet across when it's full of water? Can a digger do that job? It sounds complicated and expensive. Given that the surrounding land may be extremely wet, then that may be impermeable too. The water has to go somewhere, and if it can't go down, then it will go across. The applicant has said the system provides mitigation for the new impermeable areas on site, but the MPPF states there should be no increased flood risk, not just risk of mitigation. I went to the area in December and it was flooded, when it was very flooded, and it's really quite impossible to see how increasing the volume of water in the system and increasing the discharge rate into the basin, which has failed already and cannot be proven to be non-silting, is not going to have a detrimental impact on the surrounding area. That the basin has been increased in size to take additional water that will be discharged is shown in the report to be technically viable. However, if the water doesn't drain away from it, then the drainage strategy is already failing based on the previous application, notwithstanding this new one. So I ask that unless you can be 100% sure that the basin will not silt or that it can be controlled during peak wet times, then the committee should not approve this application, which increases water flow to the infiltration basin that has failed already and has the real potential to increase the risk of flooding elsewhere in breach of national and local policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Any questions for Councillor Thomas? No? Okay. Now, thank you, Justine. Now it's over to you guys. Anyone? Nope. Thank you.
Could I ask the officers, please, if the committee were to turn this down, and it went to appeal, what would be the reaction of the, or likely reaction of the inspector?
You can take that, Helen?
Yeah. I think we need to wind it back. And in terms of, do you have a surface water drainage scheme that stands scrutiny from the professional expertise and the statutory consultees? Yes, you do. And that approved surface water drainage scheme indicates that it can take that additional surface water. We don't have before us technical evidence that contradicts the situation on the ground. You have the LLFA advising the authority that the scheme is acceptable. It has the capacity to take that additional surface water. And I think in the absence of evidence to the contrary, I think it would be a very difficult decision to defend.
Does that answer your question? Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've got to lean towards the experts on this. They don't really see a problem, and I think the extra water from 2 bungalow roofs instead of 2 house roofs is very little, really, in the scheme of things. So I don't see a problem with this change to the plans. So I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Ward? Councillor Fisher, thank you. If there's any other questions, no other questions, we have a proposed, Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm concerned about this, and the reasons are that it's the historical context of the existing site. I do remember this application previously. I do remember seeing the photographs of flooding down and across to housing before as well, existing housing, which is still there. Triggered the memory. And I think that's really what the opposers are saying, and I do agree with the opposing in this extent anyway, that when you go to the MPF 155, 156, 157, it all points to it should be avoided in terms of development, existing flood risks. It should be mitigated. It should be tests need to be put in place, and all those points have been made, and they are relative. They're accurate to the MPPF, and commend the opposers here for pointing those out. However, I think what our struggle is here is the evidence. Is this the evidence to actually support the opposition that's coming forward on this technically? And that is our problem. I have a suspicion, and strong suspicion, that the residents are probably correct because they live there. They understand the area, and also the flow rates that was being put forward by one of the residents in terms of the 21 per second seemed to be a bit alarming to me, actually, with that water basin and the existing situation. So I'm concerned about it. However, without technical support, I fear that this will be agreed, and I fear in the future there probably will be flooding occurring down there, and it'll all be down to the management company, and however much that management company is going to be charged the residents to continuously try to sort this out. And I suspect that's what's going to happen here. That'd be for whoever's buying the houses. Having been a director and a chair director to one of these management companies for 12 years, I'm well aware of these sorts of situations. So that's about it, Chair, for me. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Riley. I think everyone is probably in agreement with what you're saying, but I think our hands are tied. The fact that all our consultees, professional consultees, have no issues with this. So if there's nothing else anyone else wants to say, we've got a proposer and a seconder, then we'll go to the vote. Is there anything anyone else wants to add? Okay, well, it's been proposed by Councillor Ward and seconded by Councillor Fisher. All those in favour of approval of this scheme?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
6. And all those against?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. Well, that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, it's now nearly 15:15, so we'll have a 5-minute break. So bear in mind your movement around the building. If you need to have a break now, guys, if we can come back at 20 past, it's just over 5 minutes if you want to have a break. Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Item 2 on the agenda, 2016-1873, land east of Pound Lane and west of Heath Road, Plumstead Road East. Over to you, Nigel.
Thanks again, Chair. So item 2. This relates to an application that has previously been determined by Planning Committee and authority delegated to officers for approval. However, a revision to the application site area denoted by the red line plan to accommodate an additional drainage basin means it must come back before members to consider this change, but it's that change only. And so consideration is limited to just this matter and not revisiting the principle of the development as previously resolved. The change in the red line to provide for a drainage basin on the north side is minor, but is required due to changes to the drainage strategy as a result of issues regarding land ownership. Recommendation is to approve as set out on page 35. But just to illustrate the issue, members are probably familiar with the site on Plumstead Road, north of Brook Farm. Just to put it in context, you've got GT6 allocation here, which has an outline planning permission for a mix of business and residential developments, including a new realignment stopping up of Green Lane north and the road coming through the development to a junction onto Plumstead Road, which will be the roundabout junction that's part of this proposal. You've then got GT8 allocation, land owned by the District Council, that then connects to GT7 to the north. And all of these roads within each of those growth areas provide links, which ultimately will provide an orbital link road between the business park to the south and the airport to the north. Just a closer view to get your bearings, just southwest of Thorpe End Garden Village. That was the original red line plan, and the area we're considering is in here. So that was the edge, the outer edge of the red line. It included the land for the roundabout, footway improvements, and a T-junction into GT8, this triangular area of land here. And the proposal is to amend that red line to widen it to the west to accommodate a drainage basin on the north side. Previously, all the drainage basins were proposed on the south side. That's the roundabout that members have already resolved to approve. That roundabout junction is required to service the Brook Farm development to the south and also to access GT8 to form the link through to GT7, the development that's occurring to the south of Salhouse Road. In the interim, before that connection is made, again, approval exists for GT8 to be served simply by a T-junction, an access road, in advance of the development occurring to the south and that link being made to the north. That illustrates where the additional lagoon will be. I say additional, it's re-sided from the south side. And that's the drainage lagoon in relation to the roundabout proposal. But if the T-junction goes in first, then that's the drainage lagoon's position in relation to that T-junction. And I'll just leave members with that slide that just indicates the minor change to the red line to accommodate that. And that's all for me. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nigel. Any questions or clarity from the councillors? No? Okay. Moving on to public speakers then. We have Thorpe St Andrew Town Council, Thomas Foreman. I also got down Great Little Plumstead. Are you here? No, no, you, Greg. Yeah. Okay, over to you, Mr. Foreman.
Good morning, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity for the Town Council to be here in person to address you on the proposed changes to the roundabout between Thorpe St Andrew and Thorpe End. It's the Town Council's belief that the progress of the northeast growth triangle covering Thorpe St Andrew is reliant upon the construction of the roundabout on Plumstead Road. This roundabout will provide the vital link connecting the Broadland Business Park with other areas of growth towards Norwich Airport. It will enable sites GT8 and GT6 to progress, as well as benefit both GT7 and GT21 and the wider growth triangle. The Town Council has entered into discussion with Lothbury regarding the proposed development at Brook Farm, and this includes the area of parkland as well as community buildings. Despite some progress early on with these discussions, like many developments in Thorpe, it has stalled. If this does progress, we understand that it is possible that access to GT8 cannot be guaranteed, which is a key part of the infrastructure plan. Therefore, approving this application ensures the roundabout will be delivered sooner and best meet the needs of the surrounding area. Having considered other options for the road layout, it's the Town Council's view that this design contains the least compromises and is the best solution for the area. It will ensure Green Lane will be bypassed in due course by providing an alternative route, preventing vehicles from entering floodwaters under the bridge. Therefore, the Town Council supports the proposal for the changes and hopes permission will be granted for this vital piece of infrastructure so it can be delivered. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Any questions for the public speaker? No? Okay, councillors, over to you guys. Oh, Councillor Riley.
I'm not sure there's a lot to debate here. I've read all the papers fully, and I'd just like to move that we approve.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Copplestone. Okay, we've got a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour of approval? Excellent. Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, that was quick. I'm quite happy to move straight on to the next one. Sorry.
Could I just, on the point of clarification on the previous application, I meant to say this at the beginning actually, there was the clause that, sorry, that Nigel referred to on the previous application. Did we cover that in the, when we agreed to previous application? The additional clause you was talking about?
The additional condition was on the recommendation, so that will be put on the
Fine.
proposal.
We're just clarifying that
approved.
we did actually do that.
That's
Brilliant.
correct.
Okay. You happy to move straight on to item 3? Members, if Thomas, if you wish to leave, you're quite welcome to. If you want to stay, you're welcome to stay and watch the rest of the proceedings. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, item 3 is 2021-0134, the Old Pharmacy, High Street, Felsham. Over to you. Sorry. Well, he's coming back to speak at the end, so I'm sure.
Okay, so item 3, the Old Pharmacy 3 High Street, Fulsham. This is a full application for the erection of a new dwelling and garage within the settlement limit for parish. That is the application site. It's to the west of the main road that runs north-south through Fulsham. That's Fulsham Primary School to the north. You've got development to the south and also development behind existing frontage development. So there's a mixed grain of development. And that's why we conclude that a development in this position will not be out of character or detrimental to the conservation area. It's within the settlement limit, as that slide indicates, within that green hatched area that you see. Also within the conservation area, and we've got detailed comments in relation to that, and your Historic Environment Officer does not object to the proposal. Aerial view of the application site and access coming off the high street into the site. The access is the element that has changed in relation to this proposal, and it's useful to show on this slide. There was a previous application on this site where access was proposed, quite contrived, of coming through a courtyard to the front of these properties and leading out through an existing gap and access between these buildings. The Highway Authority objected to that route of access. Officers were also concerned of how that would impact on the amenity of these existing residential properties. The application was resubmitted, but again still included that earlier means of access, but through negotiation the access has been relocated to the north within land owned by the Old Pharmacy. That access can be delivered. The Highway Authority have confirmed they have no highway safety objections in that regard, and that has overcome concerns from both themselves and your officers. But just to carry on with the scheme, that's the block plan, an L-shaped property in this location here with a double garage. That's the means of access coming into the site, direct from the high street. as I say, the dwelling and garage, sufficient curtilage around it. It's quite a contained site, as you'll see from photographs. It's a contemporary form of dwelling in terms of rendered elevations, slate roof tiles, etc., designed using sort of 1.5 story principles with accommodation within the roof space at first floor level. That balcony looks west over open fields, and the positioning of openings at first floor level is such that there's no overlooking of neighbouring properties. That's the garage, and then that's the proposed point of access. This is the Folsham Primary School. That position of the access is clear of the yellow zigzag, no waiting or no parking lines. Access comes in at this point. The plot itself is located behind this more modern red brick wall. The view looking north along the high street with the proposed access to the left. That's looking south across the frontage of the old pharmacy. That's the application site shown in the back here. So the built form is well accommodated within the existing form and character. And then the contained application site, that's the western boundary. You've got what looks like Leylandii hedging, very much self-contained. It shows it in relation to the primary school. The garage would be somewhere in this position with the dwelling in the foreground. Looking due east, gain for the primary school, that's the applicant's existing property. And leave members on that slide. So in terms of key considerations, there are no evidence harms now that the access has been revised. I would draw members' attention to the supplementary schedule where we have now received some additional landscaping plans, which avoids the need for the condition referred to. So with that change, suggested change to the conditions, the recommendation remains one of approval as set out on page 88 of the agenda. 75 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nigel. Any questions for the officers? Councillor Beadle?
Thank you, Chair. The ownership of the proposed and existing residence is leaving a, shall we say, an irregular shaped curtilage to the existing residence. Is that reasonable? Is it appropriate?
Straight answer is yes. Their curtilage, if I just outline it, retains this element here. So there's sufficient rear and front curtilage. It's an interesting property because it's orientated, I think, north-south, whereas a lot of the properties here are east-west. So it has a frontage to the high street, but it has private curtilage to the front and also private curtilage to the rear. So we consider that sufficient.
Sorry, Chair. What I'm trying to drive at is to the extreme west of the remaining curtilage to the property is sort of wraps around and butts onto the high school playing field, not the high school, the primary school playing field. It seems a bit.
This may help. This line. So that's the application site.
The red line, yes.
That's the red line, and then everything else in blue.
Yeah, that bit there. That's the bit I'm referring to, Chair.
Well, that's retained within the ownership of the old pharmacy.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I think.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you, Chair. The old pharmacy property, will that use the same access as the proposed dwelling house? Can you tell me what that blue building or blue piece is in sort of adjacent to the north of the old pharmacy, please, Nigel?
That's a swimming pool. No, I'm kidding. No, sorry.
I thought the same, Chair.
Is this
It is, yeah.
Is it? Oh, I do.
I believe the old pharmacy has its own means of access, because where that access is shown proposed for the building plot, the curb is currently an upstand, so they don't get access. They've got their own separate vehicular access.
Okay, we've got supporters speaking on this, so maybe if they've got any other questions then. Any other questions for Nigel? Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Mavers. Are you 5 minutes? One. Okay, lovely. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to reiterate what Nigel and planners have said, that it is kind of in keeping with the kind of rules in terms of settlement, so and everything else. And to give you a bit of context, we've lived in Filsham 33 years. We've moved here in Norfolk from our work. We hope to continue living in the village for the rest of our lives. Current property, you can see, is large, and we wanted to move into something which would be future-proofed, with downstairs bedroom and air conditions and easy to maintain, hence the design. In relation to the core then, that's why I'm here, it's being said it's not in keeping with the surrounding properties. We believe that it is, and it does fit in. One of the attractions of Filsham is that just in the surrounding vicinity of the property, you've got a Victorian school, Georgian property, pharmacy, you've got a mock Gustatian terrace, converted post office cottage, 18th century cottage. You've got a whole mix of styles. There's not one style you can pick out. The uncommon characteristic is that they all have strong architectural features, hence it's a conservation. And we believe that this adds to that strong architectural feature. Having taken fit in with the surrounding property is not strictly accurate. The second closest building to the site is the new school classroom, which is 21st century design, cedar clad, coloured panels, and a mock slate roof. So there is an existing precedent for modern 21st century buildings. In addition, the street scene is not affected whatsoever. Cannot properties that are projected cannot actually see from their houses this particular property. And on the high street, all you'll be able to see is a painted gable end and a slate roof, which is in keeping with properties all over the high street. So, the other key reason why we've come up with this design is that we want these properties to be very energy efficient, cheap to run, easy to maintain, etc. To do that, we needed to get maximum solar gain. Maximum solar gain is large windows. Large windows mean each day you've got to have a relatively modern design. It is of the time, except it may not be to everyone's taste, but there's no one can really see it, and I don't think that's an issue. So, in summary, I'd just like to say the carbon capture on this site is still greater than most properties in the village. So we would like to remain interested by creating a new property, give something back to the community. And also this will create some much needed wealth to the village, which is unfortunately slowly dying. Since we've moved there, only 2 new substantial houses have been built in 33 years, but 6 shops, so businesses have closed. Strongly believe that those properties enhance the conservation area and will enable us to continue living in the village for the rest of our lives, whilst freeing up a large family. The house deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mavis. Any questions for the public speaker? No. Councillor Peck, you were next down to speak. No. No, mine stays on.
Got it. Right. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I wish to apologise to the committee and to the officers and also to the applicant. I did, due to an oversight, I did try to withdraw my call in, but I was unfortunately too late. And it was due to a number of issues I've had recently, which I won't go into. But I would just like to say that I've also spoken, so I won't be objecting to the application. I have spoken to all the residents, well, most of the residents that are impacted, that live in the close there. And they now believe that the amended application is the best mitigation that they can hope for, and they do not wish to oppose this application. Hence, none of them are here today to oppose it. Likewise, the parish council are no longer opposing this application based on the revised, particularly the revised entranceway. However, although highways have approved it now and it seems acceptable, the only thing I would ask, and I would ask the applicants to try and do this, that road is as you can see, is right adjacent to the school. And that is of some concern. The road already becomes heavily congested at school times, and it is felt that the addition of construction traffic would only add to this and be dangerous for school children. So I would ask that during the construction period, the applicant does everything possible to make sure the safety of those parents and children at the school. The site is in a conservation area, and I still think probably it's, in my opinion, not in the same sort of vernacular as the other buildings. But as the applicant says, you can't really see it from the main road, although you can see a bit of it. But it's not. It doesn't detract from the main road. I don't believe. So. Therefore, I personally have no objection to this application being approved, and I just apologise for wasting everybody's time bringing them here.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would like to move, considering Councillor
Hang
Peck's
on one
comments.
second. I appreciate. We just need to see if there's any questions for Councillor Peck first. There's not. So
Okay,
we'll
could
now
I
move to you guys.
Yeah, can I move that we approve the
course you
application
can.
as there is no objections?
Of course you
Thank
can.
you.
Do we have a seconder? Go. Man, I think I caught John first this time. Sorry, I caught Joe first, but John was just there. So we'll go for proposed by Councillor Copstone, seconded by Councillor Ward. All those in favour? Lovely. Thank you all very much.
Efficiency. I'm not here to give Councillor Greg Peck, as he always knows from me, any hard time around this whatsoever. But I just wonder if you could perhaps clarify, Helen, the point about the recognitions being brought and pulled in. I mean, did you receive an email?
The agenda, yeah, I can clarify that. The agenda had already been published, so we then needed to continue with the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy for a 5-minute break. If anybody else wants, also happy to carry on. Carry on? Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Mavey, you're happy? Yep. Okay, moving on to item agenda 4, 2021-0284, land west of Norwich Road and south of William Bush Close, Corston. Over to you, Nigel.
Thanks again, Chair. You're not sick of my voice yet. This is an outline application with all matters reserved for the erection of 3 dwellings, including self-build. The item is before members for consideration at the request of the ward member for the reasons set out in para 4.2 on page 79 of your agenda. The recommendation is to refuse as contrary to the provisions of the development plan. We go to the slide presentation. That's main settlement of Corston, the application site on the extreme southern edge, as you see here, triangular shaped plot of land that has a frontage to Norwich Road. That's the application site outlined here. You can see that there's the existing hard edge of the settlement here, and you will see that in an extract from the settlement limit from the site allocations DPD. So it relates to an area of agricultural land, and the applicant owns another piece of land here, edged in blue, which doesn't form part of the application site. Illustrative layout, say this is in outline with all matters reserved. This is just one illustrating how potentially 3 dwellings could be accommodated on site, utilizing a single point of access that incorporates a footway along the frontage to connect with a footway that stops at the edge of this existing property that forms the hard edge of the existing settlement. Let's extract from the site allocations DPD. That's the site here. It's adjacent, but clearly outside of the settlement limit. There is reference in the report to the relationship with heritage assets, but it concludes that the setting, principally in relation to the church, has no detrimental impact, but we just illustrate that. And again, the setting in relation to conservation area. Larger expanded view of the illustrative site plan. It's a single point of access leading into a small turning head with the properties accessed off that. Proposed to be, or indicated to be, single story, and then a footway along the site frontage to connect with the existing footway on Norwich Road on the west side. Some views of the application site, so that it's a triangular shape that comes into fine point at this point here. This is the edge of the settlement limit. It's quite a nice, soft, contained edge to the village at this point, with then quite open views then of the wider countryside. So that's looking south along the site frontage. What you would get is a new footway as part of the proposal along that existing soft edge of that agricultural land. Further view into the site, there's reference to Corston Wood, depending in terms of your direction of view. You will see it in the foreground in relation to Corston Wood, but also on the approach from the south along Norwich Road. This is one of the views from the south. So the site area is in here. I refer to that existing soft edge to the setting of the village. That's the church tower. You do have buildings in between, which is why there isn't an objection in terms of affecting the setting of the listed building or the conservation area. And then again, a view looking from Norwich Road further to the south, so that site area in here, but clearly you're in open countryside as you approach the village from this direction. Existing development, which is north side and within the settlement limit. Again, that contained soft edge to the village. And then just looking along the Norwich Road frontage, this is development on the west side. It just shows that existing footway, which the development proposes to continue to connect the site, which is beyond the hedge, as you see there, to the development. And then as part of the submission, the applicants have submitted a landscape visual impact assessment, which is referred to by the case officer in his report. And I'll just run through briefly that. So again, we start with the illustrative layout plan. That's a sort of CGI image of the development, possible layout of development within that triangular edge. But obviously what it does do, it projects beyond the existing contained settlement edge. And then we've got various viewpoints in terms of assessing the landscape impact. This is a viewpoint from this area here, which is to the south of the site, some way to the south along Norwich Road, and then the site at this point here. So that site is in the background. Again, a view from land to the east of Norwich Road, some way distant, looking across, and the site is in this area here. Another view closer, and the site is in this area here. Again, approaching closer to the site, again on Norwich Road. So this application site is in this area here. And then much closer, again, what this is clearly illustrating, whilst you've got development beyond it, that's within the built-up area. You've then got that soft edge, which is the forms of settlement limit. So that development would then project further south along that open exposed frontage. And then a photo looking back. That footway you saw on the earlier slide stops about here and would then be continued with the development in this location. And then a distant view again from Norwich Road with the application site in this area. So briefly, just taking members to some points in the report. In terms of the development plan, the site is outside of the settlement limit for Corston and is therefore identified as part of the countryside in the Joint Course Strategy. Policy GC2 of the Development Management DPD indicates that development will be accommodated within settlement limits and that outside of these settlement limits, development which does not result in any significant adverse impacts will be permitted, but only where it accords with a specific allocation or policy of the development plan. The site is not allocated for development in the site allocations DPD, neither does the proposal accord with any of the rural enterprise exceptions in policy H1 in the DPD relating to dwellings outside settlement limits. Planning law requires that applications for planning permission be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The material considerations in this particular case are that the applicant is looking to deliver the site as self-build, connected to the settlement to the north by an extended footway, and is promoting it as a small site to contribute towards housing requirements. Refer to the landscape visual impact assessment. The case officer has assessed these material considerations that have been advanced, and as officers we consider that they are not overriding, and these are specifically addressed by the case officer in paragraphs 5.14 and 5.15, pages 82 and 83 of your agenda. Furthermore, whilst the visual harm would be small in scale, it is still an identified harm, and that counts against the development in the context, particularly where you have an evidenced 5-year land supply, where your policies are therefore can be considered up to date and can be given full weight in the assessment of the application, particularly where sites are outside of settlement limits. So in conclusion, as set out in section 6 on pages 83 and 84 of your report, the benefits of the proposal are limited and do not outweigh the visual harm and conflict with your adopted development plan, and the recommendation remains one of refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nigel. Any questions for the Councillor Ward?
Thank you. Nigel, in the presentation, there's lots of pictures of open countryside. I don't think you make it really clear that the application is to build 3 houses opposite 3 houses on the opposite side of the road. I don't think that's very clear in the presentation. You didn't really show the 3 houses opposite.
Thank you. Councillor Cobblestone, are you bringing that up, Nigel?
Just, I can leave you on this slide, which
okay.
shows you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Nigel, the slide you're showing at the moment shows the curtilage of the proposed site in red, but then there is an area just below that in blue. Is that in the ownership of the applicant?
Yeah.
And just another point as well, you said that these 3 homes will be self-build. Will there therefore not be any community infrastructure levy charged, and what will happen about that, please?
2 points there. First point, yep, the land in blue is identified because it's owned by the applicant, but it does not form part of the application site. So you're not considering development within that area. And in terms of the development, you'll be aware under the SIL regulations that self-build, people can apply for self-build exemption, and unless that exemption is applied for, SIL would be payable. But if that exemption is applied for, then SIL wouldn't be payable.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, councillors. Moving on to public speakers then, we have Tom Mayers and Luke Broom-Lynn. If you can just identify who's going. Are you both speaking, gentlemen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and you are, sir?
Tom Mays.
Okay. Your 5 minutes whenever you're ready, sir.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair, members of the committee and officers for allowing me to speak in support of my application today. This small, sustainable site is located to the west of Norwich Road within the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit and within a short walk to the centre of Corston. It provides for much-needed bungalows within a close proximity of a range of shops, amenities and primary school, which rounds off the development on the opposite side of the Norwich Road, thus not extending the built form any further south than the properties on the eastern side of Norwich Road. There are no objections from statutory consultees. The site was supported unanimously by the parish council at their last meeting, who welcomed the proposal. There has not been a single letter of objection from local residents, which shows that the site is not controversial in any way. The proposal is for bungalows and sofa suitable for older or disabled people, and one plot, plot 1, will be for self-build only. They will be much needed 3-bedroom dwellings, by far the greatest need in Broadland. The proposal is perfect for smaller builders who really need support, as they have been in significant decline in recent years, having represented 40% of the developer market in 1990 and only 12% as of today's date. Future occupiers will support the local services and add to the vitality of Corston, and I'm committed to providing significant improved habitat and a high level of energy efficiency. The site has no technical issues and has a clean bill of health regarding ecology, highways, heritage and flood risk. The site is underused and so will not take land away from productive farming in line with the MPPF. As the officer report states, it is marginally outside of the development boundary, but this is the only conflict with the development plan, and this conflict is very minor and limited in scale. Indeed, the officer's report states that, to quote, as such, it is considered that the site would have a good connectivity to services within the settlement as any infill site within the adjoining part of the village that falls within the settlement limit. I would therefore urge members to consider the development plan taken as a whole and bear in mind all the benefits and lack of harm, and agree that in this instance the planning balance does tip in favour of the proposal. It is also worth bearing in mind that the new emerging Greater Norwich local plan aims to support just this type of proposal adjacent to the village settlement boundaries. This site lies immediately adjacent to the development boundary and so is supported in principle by the emerging policy. This is a small site that can be delivered very quickly, therefore meeting the central aim of the government of boosting housing supply. Therefore, in summary, this site provides for a small, well-located, soft-touch development in an accessible and sustainable location with many benefits, such as being on underused land, and which provides for the type of single-storey properties that are much needed, particularly for those who are older or disabled, and helping to improve the social vitality of Corston in the future. I respectfully ask the Planning Committee to approve the application.
Lovely, thank you. Any questions for the public speaker? Councillor Riley?
Just for clarity, did I hear the speaker say that one of the three would only one of the three would be self-build?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, plot 1 only.
Any other questions? Okay. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. The applicant referred to the emerging local plan. I just wondered if this site had been put forward as part of that consultation.
No, it has not.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Can I just clarify on the emerging local plan, as stated it's an emerging local plan, so we can't give any weight to any proposed policies within the plan that are coming forward at present.
Thank you.
Limited weight. It's a consideration, but a very limited weight that we can't take into account.
Okay. Luke Broomlin. Sorry,
Chair,
Councillor.
thank
Beacon.
you. Yeah. The applicant has mentioned that it's opposite some other properties. I believe the properties opposite are set well back off the road, and they have quite a lot of screening between the built structures and the road. Is that correct?
I think it's quite an unusual pattern that the properties on the other side of the road have. I'm not sure how they've been developed over the years, but it's quite an irregular pattern. And I think in some ways this new proposal will actually provide for a slightly more sort of uniform approach, and in terms of the sort of piecemeal development on the opposite side of the road.
Okay, Councillor Beagle. Okay. Mr. Lynn, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Luke Broomley, and I'm a landscape architect and town planner, formerly with Norwich City Council and the Broads Authority. I was engaged to undertake a landscape visual appraisal of this site. I just wanted to briefly go through just a few key points from this. One key reference material, although the site isn't within the conservation area, the Corston Conservation Area appraisal comments are quite interesting. It refers to the fact that the southwest of the village remains bounded by open countryside from which there are views of the church with the lower roofs of houses and farm buildings in the foreground. And it's important to conserve the firm boundary between the village and the countryside and not to blur it by further new development or infill. However, since that appraisal was prepared, a number of new buildings of fairly unremarkable merit and somewhat piecemeal development has been approved along the southern boundary of the village, the high roof lines of which have somewhat impaired the views to the church tower, which doesn't, to me, create a particularly soft edge. I mean, other development on the southeastern side of the village is also described in the conservation area appraisal as a negative influence, as they, to quote, hardly complement its special architectural character. They also note the negative influence of suburban style development comprising detached or terraced houses with low garden walls or open hedged or fenced frontages, which have in several streets detracted from the traditional character of the village. Thus, the approaches to the village near the site along Norwich Road lack any particular distinctive or coherent form or style due to the mixed development that's occurred there in recent decades. In my appraisal, I summarised that the approaches to the village along Norwich Road lack a distinctive or coherent form or style due to the mixed suburban style development. The application site itself is located where there's already a distinct perception of residential development as one enters the village northwards along Norwich Road, with development on the east side directly opposite the site and the prominent residential buildings on the western side. Mitigation landscaping comprising native hedgerow and trees along the southern boundary would provide additional landscape structure and positively enhance the visual edge of the village. The proposed buildings are single story and of a scale more suited to the area, unlike the recent large dwellings on the southwestern side of the village beyond on the immediate edge of the development site. And the visual impact will be relatively limited to close proximity to the site and won't detrimentally affect the wider landscape. And in the officer's report, it obviously, as mentioned earlier, is conceded that there no adverse impact on the setting of the church, and also that the wider landscape impact is limited, and does refer, though, to clearly will be a level of visual harm that's inherent in the construction of buildings in a previously undeveloped site. I think that's a fundamental point that I would disagree that there would necessarily be any harm to the landscape and visual assets, in that mere visibility of a new structure or feature doesn't automatically mean that it's harmful or an eyesore. landscaping and the new building should complement one another to fit into the landscape and townscape setting. And in my view, the fundamental factor is quality of the design and its response to its setting. And so insisting on the highest quality of design through the planning process is utterly crucial and fundamental. And as this is an outline application, and I can't see any reason why development on this site would necessarily be detrimental, provided exemplary design principles are upheld in the final stages. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the public speaker? Councillor Riley.
You referred to the settlements on the southwest side in terms of their design and et cetera, and there's a bit of scathing of it. I think that was fair to say. Did those developments happen within the existing settlement limit, and how long ago?
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
I know from reading the conservation area appraisal that was spoken after that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Could I ask for clarification on that?
By all means.
Straight answer is I don't know the answer to whether they were developed either inside or outside. I would imagine they were developed inside of what was a settlement limit, or possibly some members may know we had rural parish policies many years ago that had development stop lines, and development may have occurred within those. But the material factor here is that it's outside of the settlement limit, and you're only determining this proposal, obviously not the results of previous decisions.
Okay. Councillor Peck, you're back on, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. This small-scale development site is in a location where there is already a distinct perception of residential development as one enters the village when travelling northward along the Norwich Road. The development would have a limited impact on the countryside around it, as the new development would only be mainly visible from the site only, and it would extend no further south than the existing dwellings on the opposite side of the Norwich Road. Being of a lower height than the existing buildings to the north, they would not stand out against a backdrop of existing development. Hedge planting along those boundaries currently open will help soften the impact of the development. Excuse me. The impact on the wider landscape is limited for the reasons identified in the applicant's own appraisal. The new development would be seen against the backdrop of existing development when travelling north along the Norwich Road. Given this and the fact that the development proposed is single-storey, the proposal will not have any adverse impact on neighbouring properties or Corston as a whole. The Parish Council fully support this application and are pleased with the provision of the footpath. An ecology survey undertaken by Norfolk County Council ecologists states the site is fit for purpose, and they welcome the applicant's commitment to provide 25% biodiversity net gain. Also, highways have no objection. This is a small-scale, light-touch development and is just what is needed in our rural villages, providing much-needed houses without altering the character of the village. CPRE have a policy of supporting small-scale development in rural villages rather than large-scale 144 houses on the edge of an existing village. So I think this fits in with that desire. So on that basis, and I would remind you that you have in the past, well, not you personally, but this committee in the past has actually approved sites outside the settlement limit. I think the first one on the agenda today was in that category. So I don't think that should rule it out, as the previous speaker has mentioned. So on that basis, I would ask the committee to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peck. Any questions for Councillor Peck? Nope. Okay. Over to you guys. Who wants to kick off? Okay.
Are there many other bungalows in this particular village? Do we know? I'm just curious. I'm interested because it's something that we don't see come to planning very often, is bungalows, and I wonder whether that has some sort of impact as well.
Okay, can you help with that, Nigel?
I couldn't hear very well, but was it are there many bungalows
in this area?
I would imagine there are. There's probably a mix. I mean, you saw on the slide, I think there's bungalows opposite, chalets, but there will be bungalows within the existing built-up area. There'll be a mix of dwelling types.
Okay. Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Chair. I think there are things going for this application. The connecting footpath is sustainable. It connects up with the other housing. I think there's a point that Councillor Ward made earlier on, but it is actually opposite to other housing as well, which in its setting makes sense. And the edging of this development could also be soft edged with the existing settlement that's there on those photos we've sort of seen as well, the soft landscaping. It's 3 bungalows and the parish council. I mean, at the end of the day, the NPPF and the local development plan has been designed there to support and protect areas and provide housing, land supply, etc. It's also there to help and support and protect the local amenity and also the local view of people that live there and what they think in terms of their development. And if this was harmful to the village, I think we would have seen that from this parish council. Quite the reverse. They're actually saying the opposite to that. So there's a lot going for this in my mind. However, there is one problem with this that I'm seeing at the moment in terms of our current policies. And the current policy is it is outside of our settlement limit. To mitigate that, then there has to be, under the MPF and local plan, there has to be a design criteria or a self-build criteria that is attached to this. And we've seen that in other applications. I know Greg mentioned this about we have agreed outside settlement limits before, but there's always been a criteria attached to that. If we don't, and if that criteria doesn't exist, then we're at risk of opening up floodgates in terms of development outside of our land supply. And Nigel's already referred to over the 5 years here. So there is a real balance to be had here. And I think that if all 3 of these bungalows were self-build, to me, that would have just tipped it in terms of the self-build benefits that you get, and everything else then would fit. And I think it would just about tip it. But I'm finding it hard to hang my hat on enough in terms of design or self-build, bearing in mind it's outside settlement limits. We need to safeguard that policy in terms of housing supply. And unless I hear different in a moment, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to support I'm going to have to support the proposition to oppose it. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Copperson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was looking at 1.2 on page 77, which talks about 3 dwellings on the Norwich Road, single-storey properties, and will be delivered as self-build. So I really need to be sure that 2 of them will be liable for SIL, because I am slightly at odds with what Councillor Riley said. I actually quite like SIL being paid on properties because I like to think the community will benefit in some way or another. So can the officer just reassure me that it is sort of set in stone? 2 of them will be liable for SIL and only 1 will be self-build in this application, please.
I think unless you put measures in place through potentially a legal agreement, then potentially not. You cannot restrict someone's ability to apply for a self-build exemption further down the line. I think you've heard from the speaker today, one and one only plot is being advanced for self-build. It's for members to weigh that up in their consideration as to how material that is, plus other items in the that are being promoted as to whether that outweighs the conflict with your development plan.
Thank you, Nigel. Anybody else? Councillor Beadle?
Thank you, Chair. God, this is a difficult one, isn't it?
It's a fine balance.
When you go into Corston on the Norwich Road, the south of this site, the road is actually slightly higher. It's I won't call it a hill, but it's on rising ground, and you can see right the way across the village, and including the church. And it is an unusual church. It is an unusual church. It's virtually unique in that it's built of cut stone, and it was a church which was actually visited regularly by the Queen Mother. Nevertheless, it is some distance away, and I noticed in the officer's report that in the officer's assessment, it doesn't affect the outlook of the church. The properties on the close to the north of this site, northwest of this site, are two-storey properties, and in a normal event, they would be quite a hard barrier, but they are slightly lower than the surrounding land, and there is a big hedge to their boundary. This site would actually create a hard hedge, and if there's an approval here, then there must be loads of restrictions on landscaping and all the rest of it. And I'm not sure, and I'm seeking guidance on this, whether we can actually put advice in any approval on that there should be significant soft landscaping to the southwest of the site. I also note that there's quite a few parcels of land in this area which are also for sale, and I just wonder whether, as one member has already said, this would open the floodgates. The property opposite is actually, as I've said previously, stands back from the road somewhere and has quite a lot of soft landscaping between it and the road. And it is quite a pleasant outlook generally when you drive down this road, and the urban area would be extended into the countryside quite a lot. Some of the other factors which could be used to support this application is, have it as an exception site, but that's not been mentioned whatsoever. And there are a lot of bungalows in Corston. I suspect there's far more bungalows in Corston than in the average village. So on the self-build issue, I agree with what's been said about the self-build, but then that's going to have to be left till the detail. So I'm open to persuasion. I can see a lot of merits against this, but I can see some for it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Beadle. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. This is sort of much needed housing. It's sustainable, and it's not extending the built area of the village. So any sort of outsider looking in would say, common sense would say, there's nothing wrong with this application. I know it's outside the settlement limit, but the settlement limit is wrong, I think, on this occasion. So I'm quite happy for it to go ahead, and I would like to move approval, please.
Okay. Okay. Do you need anything from Councillor Ward?
Yes, in moving a recommendation, you need to make it really clear why you are going contrary to your development plan and what other material considerations you are putting forward in granting consent. And this is really important to do that, because you should be giving significant weight to your development limits. And where we have a land supply, we don't need that additional housing. So it's really important that you do define what other considerations you are given to that significant policy consideration that you should be taking into account, which is not, going against policy GC2, which is, having a development limits. It's the council's development limits. It's not the officer's limits. It's the council's desired position of ensuring that obviously we have development in the right places and we go through due process in allocating land. So I think we would just need to have a bit more information on that recommendation to go contrary to your policies and what significant other material considerations you are given. Clearly, there has been other consideration put forward by the applicant. We hear that one self-build will be party to the proposal and the footpath link.
We've got the self-build and the footpath.
I think that, and the fact that it's opposite three existing properties, I think that's sufficient myself.
Thank you.
I thought the points made by the applicant is aware, and I appreciate this is outlined, and it's a question of whether there's any way we can deal with the matters reserved, but we've got to, as you say, put some reference forward now. And I think the importance from what they've made about self-build is very helpful to me, just on this balance, because it is very balanced. But equally, I think it will match up with those, I see it matching up with those three on the other side of the road.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councillor Leggett. Any other comments? Councillor Brennan?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused. Seek clarification. Paragraph 1.2 states that they're proposed to be detached single-storey properties and delivered as self-build.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm now hearing that there's going to be two built and only one self-build.
Yeah.
So what we're hearing is contrary to the original proposal.
I'm just clarifying what the applicant said in his presentation, that one of the bungalows would be self-built. If members were to support the contrary recommendation, giving weight to that one self-build, you would need to secure that by a legal agreement. So we would need a legal agreement to secure that and to ensure that meets the definition of self-build. But from what I've heard today, the applicant was very clear today that one of the properties would be self-build, and that would be what we would then recommend, that you have a 106 agreement on how that is delivered to be able to come forward as a self-build. But we are, from what I've heard from the applicant, just looking at one of those today.
So on that, Helen, when it goes to the vote, are we bringing that into?
I would recommend, because we don't know whether that vote's going to be lost or not.
But the councillors need to know what they're voting on. So if it's,
I would
if it's
recommend,
conditioned
if the vote was lost, then to secure that one self-build, we would look to do that with a legal agreement, because you are giving material consideration to the fact that you are bringing forward a self-build. Just checking with Nigel that would be what we would recommend on this case.
Because unless you've got that legally binding obligation, then the applicant, through submitting reserved matters, wouldn't necessarily have to promote one of them as self-build.
But that would be on this vote, not if the vote is lost. If the proposal is to go against officer's recommendation now to approve.
We're talking the mechanism to deliver that, section 106, and to secure it if you want to give material weight to it.
Yeah.
To approve, then you'd have to open the second vote, which I think is what you're saying. Then in that, you have the exact proposition back and forth, which would include the legal agreement for the third self-build. That's what you're.
No, I'm not trying to say that. I'm thinking when we vote, if we're voting on this now, with subject that one,
Subject to secure the self-build.
Are we happy we've got different reasons, satisfactory reasons?
Yeah, the reasons that have come forward are the sustainable location of the site, the provision of the footpath, the fact that there is dwelling opposite, and the self-build. And I think the applicant clarified it was one self-build coming forward, and that may be sufficient to then grant permission.
Okay. Councillor Bean.
Chair, the report quite clearly says the self-build.
Yes.
It's in the document. It's self-build. So if we want to oppose the officer recommendation and grant consent, all of them would be self-build. The applicant in his presentation was saying one would be.
Okay.
So he's actually varying what's the document which is here. So if we actually want to agree with this proposal, they would all be self-build.
Okay, I'll take that on board. We need to go to Councillor Ward to see if he's accepting of that change. You're happy with one? Okay.
Well, Chairman, in which case I would like to propose amendment that they all should be self-built.
Okay. Any seconders on the amendment?
So I think that's the only.
Okay, okay. So this is nice. This is what we want.
Yes.
And when it's on this balance, we want to be involved. So we've got a proposer and a seconder. For the amendment. Yes, we do. So Councillor Beadle has put the amendment that we enforce all three of them as self-build, seconded by Councillor Riley. Who's in favour of the amendment of all three being self-build? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and those against that amendment?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay. Now, can we have another amendment of 2 and 1, or is that just?
Chairman, if you wish to propose it and it's seconded, we can vote on another amendment before you proceed to the proposal.
If you want to propose 2 self-build and 1 others, I'll second it, Chair. Although as Chair, you don't need a seconder.
Yeah, but John's got a proposal.
I'll come back to
Otherwise, it's another amendment. So John,
Well,
Yes.
it is amendment.
Yeah.
It's proposed an amendment.
No, let's go to the vote. It's proposed by Councillor Ward, 1 self-build with the 106 agreement, the highway improvement with the path, seconded by Councillor Leggett. Pardon?
We would then, officers, put the appropriate conditions that the statutory consultees have put on, which would be relating to your landscaping, the highway infrastructure. So that could be delegated to officers to make
Okay.
sure the right conditions as per the statutory and the landscaping comes forward, etc.
Okay. Yeah.
Helen, so as part of the 106 agreement, will this also include the footpath along the front and all the landscaping sort of mitigation measures as part of that 106 agreement to make sure that we get everything in place, please?
106 would only do those measures that can't be done by condition, which may at this stage just be the self-build mechanism to show that that's come forward. The highway works may be able to be done to, if you said a condition that says section 278 is out. So we will make sure that it's either done by appropriate conditions or 106 is required.
Okay. Any?
Chair, could I have that minuted, please?
Well, actually, on the minutes, the minutes, we can come back to that. We'll come back to that at the end. Because we're live streamed, so everything is recorded.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's on the minutes because it's recorded.
Thank you.
Okay. 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 Proposed by Councillor Ward, seconded by Councillor Leggett. All those in favour of approval of the scheme as per the conditions we discussed. Show of hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 members voting for.
Those against?
1, 2, 3.
And
Councillor Monco voted for, so that was 8, I think.
no, are you abstaining, Steve?
No, I'm sorry, I'm voting against.
I count
Yeah,
Councillor Monco.
yeah.
in
So
that.
there's-
So could
can we
those
just have the-
voting against please show clearly?
I think
Thank
it's
you.
where we lined up.
Thank
Sorry.
you. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is
8,
11.
12.
Yes.
Yeah.
7,
Okay.
4.
Okay, that's carried. Enjoy the rest of your day, sir. Right, that concludes item 4. You gentlemen, you're free to leave. And we now are moving on to item 6 on the agenda, which is planned appeals. Picking that up, Nigel?
Yeah, very brief, Chair. One appeal decision which related to an obscure glazing condition which an inspector took a different view on, and an appeal lodged in Blowfield. Subdivision of a plot where they want to demolish 1 and build 2. The plot has already been previously subdivided, and as officers consider it was a cramped form of development. The site wasn't big enough in total for 3 dwellings. Been refused, and we'll await the outcome of the appeal.
Lovely, thank you. And on that note, that concludes today's meeting. Thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure to be back up here.
It really is, Chair. Honestly.
Thank you, Chair.
It's so good, isn't it?